How do you think being an only child impacted you throughout your life?
Oh man, you're getting right in there. Being an only child, it's really given me a great connection with people. I have such a great relationship with my parents. I don't know if all only children have that, but I've got a fantastic relationship with my parents, and I think it's really cool. It's something that I don't think a lot of people have, and it's something that I thought was pretty normal just because that's kind of what I grew up in and that's all I knew. And it wasn't until I really got older when I actually started posting about, the relationship that I have with my dad. And, he would be on my YouTube vlogs when I, started my journey on YouTube. And a lot of people would comment that they really are inspired about the relationship that I have with my dad. So, um, I've got a great connection with him. I've got a great connection with my mom, and I think that has allowed me to also build great relationships with people. Um, but I mean, I don't know. Are you an only child or not?
I'm not an only child, but the reason why I asked, and I asked my guest this last week as well, because he was an only child too. But I asked because I do relate to it to a certain extent because I have older siblings who are much older than me. So from the time I was 11 or 12 years old, I was the only one in my house. So for I feel like my most formative
Mm,
years, it felt like I was an only child to a certain extent, where I had the benefits of having siblings, but I feel like I also had the benefits of having that alone time. And I would say, similar to you, I feel like I was able to build a very, very strong relationship with my parents. And I would say probably just a different type of relationship with my parents because
mm,
I was put into a different environment with them where it was kind of just the three of us together rather than with my siblings being around.
hmm.
And I definitely connect with the fact that you're saying it has allowed you to build strong relationships or strong connections. I definitely resonate with that as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
tying that into college life now,
Hmm.
from my perspective, college was a huge success for me because while I was alone, in my house during my high school years, I feel like I really benefited from now being around a lot of just young people and having that sort of those deeper connections or just being able to get out there more. So
Hmm.
I mean, I really benefited from the college experience. I feel like I became a much smarter person.
Hmm.
Um, on the flip side of that, and something that I want to talk to you more about, I feel like within the college environment, I struggled with it, and I would say I struggled with this in high school as well. Is that I think that the school environment in general can just lead to conformity and you can become detached from yourself. And I know
Hmm.
that you didn't necessarily have the best college experience. What
Right.
was it specifically about the college environment that you think caused such a disconnect for you?
I think I knew what I wanted at an earlier age. I think I knew who I was for the most part at a younger age from being alone. I'm an introvert, and so that's also helpful. I spent a lot of time obviously with my parents, but I spent a lot of time alone too. And so the whole drinking thing and the partying thing, um, it didn't really make sense to me. I felt just out of place my entire really honestly even high school too a lot of the times because some of my friends started to get into weed and drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, and I was an athlete, and so I just never felt like that was something that I wanted to do. I felt like it was harmful. And I have some different thoughts now as I'm older. um, but I was always just kind of confused in college. Like I didn't understand the thrill of like getting wasted. And I did. I mean, would try to fit in. And so there were times where I would, I'd get drunk and I'd go out and I would have a good time here and there for sure. But it was just the constant like doing of that I didn't want to do. I wanted to create. I wanted to build a business. I wanted to, not even money, really. I didn't really think about money. I just wanted to create things. And I got really into YouTube, and I felt like finally, when I started discovering the people on YouTube, vloggers, mainly in the fitness space, that's really kind of where I got my start. That's when I finally felt like, oh my God, I'm not alone here. People are like me. So that was kind of my experience with school. Is just always feeling like odd man out, and even in high school too, except for sports. Sports was where I was able to connect. You know,
Do you think there was any benefit for that,
benefit of that experience through school.
of feeling like the odd man out?
Yes, I think there's a benefit to it. Um, I think it allows you to be compassionate and empathize with a lot of different people. And that was kind of one of my superpowers that I kind of later discovered, is that I'm able to connect with many different types of people because when I understand getting picked on. I understand feeling uncomfortable in my own skin. I understand feeling not confident. I understood a lot of those things. And so it has allowed me to sympathize and empathize with other people and connect with all kinds of people and really just make people feel comfortable. Um, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot of good things. The black sheep of the family, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, exactly. So fast forwarding to your graduation, then you walk out mid ceremony. In your head, what's the plan or the roadmap that you laid out for yourself for post grad life?
It was really just a path of self discovery. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to create things and take a different path. And so after school, I felt the pressure like I think a lot of kids feel is leaving their parents' house and being able to make it on their own, feeling like, is this even possible for me to even make this a reality, or am I going to be stuck in my parents' basement until the age of 35 or 40 or whatever, and battling that thought. Do I have what it takes? You see kids nowadays. I don't know how old you are, but um, you see kids.
I'm
What
20. I'm 25 and live with my parents currently.
they Yeah. So I think I moved out when I think I just turned 25. So I don't know if you're relating with some of these things, but
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about having that great relationship with your parents, where it gives you that accessibility or that comfort to a certain extent of being okay with still being within that environment, but also allowing yourself to work on the things that you want to work on.
yeah, totally. I mean, my parents were they were very supportive. I mean, my dad always wanted me to get, classic story, get the job. He was a financial advisor. I even interviewed at a firm and I was just sitting there in the interview like, why am I here right now? This is, this is insane. And so, yeah, so I had to deal with that. And so I felt that pressure, but it was honestly a good pressure. I feel like we all need a little fire under our asses. Everyone has a different fuel source. And for me, I kind of had to create like a do or die situation. And that's just the fuel source that I needed for myself because, you know, I, I had such a great relationship, but some of the things that did hurt me, for example, is my parents really did everything for me. And so because they did absolutely everything for me, I didn't have that drive. I had to create that for myself. I had to learn it. So I had this dream and this vision for myself, but I had a hard time putting in the effort or um, getting outside of my comfort zone really because I've been comfortable my whole life. Everything was given to me. I had opportunity, I had a pretty easy, very easy childhood and I'm extremely blessed for it. The downside of that is having a hard time, doing taking risk, right? And so I had to recreate that for myself. And so I just moved out. I had a little bit of money saved up. I had started taking on video clients. I was creating a personal brand with my YouTube channel. I was vlogging, and I was using that as a portfolio to start acquiring clients. But they're all coming to me, right? I wasn't like actively trying to like build a business. I was just creating things really at heart. I kind of learned the business stuff later on. And so, yeah, a little bit of money saved up, had some clients, and I just moved out, got an apartment that felt like a fucking stretch for me, and just sent it, and haven't looked back since. It was probably the best thing that I could have done for myself. At the same time, it's also caused like, some PTSD as well, just having that like how am I going to pay for bills? And so I look back and I'm like, would I have done it the same way? And I think I would have because that's just what I needed at that time. Everyone's different, you know.
So you talked about earlier how you got into fitness a lot, and that's how you started from a creating standpoint as well. And I find it really interesting. 8 years later, and your bodybuilding transformation video is still your most viewed.
Is it?
Is still your most viewed YouTube video.
Nice.
What did you learn about yourself doing that bodybuilding prep and show?
That's a great question. What did I learn about myself? I learned that I didn't love it as much as I thought I did. Uh, I learned, man, the commitment that I had during that time was pretty insane. I was pretty robotic. I had structure, I had systems, I got up at the same time, I ate the same thing, and it taught me a lot about structure. Um, I can't compare with the military, but I think it's like a small, like there's definitely some crossover there a little bit. And that's why I see a lot of the military guys, they're just, a lot of them get really successful because they have their schedule and they do the things that benefit them every single day. And so I took a lot from that into what I do now is having that structure and those systems. Um, I will say though, not learning from that specifically, but I have a pattern. Full transparency, one of my poor patterns in life is doing something at 110% and going all out and then just, completing and then never touching it again. And that's something that I've worked really hard towards not doing and maybe not being so intense initially and allowing things to become habit and then become a practice and then just become kind of who we are. That started with kind of the bodybuilding show because it was a one and done for me. But that has been kind of like a pattern in my life is like, I don't want to say not finishing things, but I recognize that I go all out and I become obsessive, but it's short lived. And so I've kind of had to not find, but if I sense that, it's like, am I doing this because I really want to, or am I doing it for another reason?
My favorite part of that entire video is probably the first 4 seconds. And you put a quote on the screen that says, "You cannot dream yourself into a character. You must hammer and forge yourself one." What
Hmm.
character did you want to be back then when you put that video out?
What character? I mean, man, I was so immature and thought I knew more than I did. And so the character that I wanted to be, I mean, I wanted, in all seriousness, like I just wanted to be somebody. I felt like I possessed something that was meant to be shared. I feel like we all kind of have that in us. Everybody. I think everybody has it to some degree. And so I knew I just wanted to be somebody of value to inspire people and be there for people. I didn't know really what that was at the time. I mean, I started YouTube for the wrong reasons. I started it to really just be an influencer. Like it just looked cool. I wanted to be that. And then it turned into something different where I started to actually enjoy the craft of making videos.
There's a quote that I saw from you from a different podcast, and you said it wasn't until I started creating videos that I truly wanted to create that I started building an audience. And
Mm,
I completely agree that if you're creating from this point of view of an outcome in mind, it's never going to work and it's never going to feel fulfilling. And I always
mm,
believe that to a certain degree, you have to create just for the sake of creating because you want to see whatever you're working on put out into the world. And
mm,
I know that Seinfeld had an impact on you and your YouTube videos, like you said, creating videos with you and your dad. And that's how I came across you. Your YouTube videos that you put out a while back were just so raw and so real that I think that's what made people connect with them the most because it felt like you were just really showing a glimpse into your life rather than trying to create something. And another great quote that I heard from you is that you said, pain is the biggest motivator more so than the glory. People who hit rock bottom catapult and just do some amazing things that they didn't think was possible.
mm.
What was this moment for you?
I would say actually semi recently. I've talked about this before, but it was back in 2021, so a few years ago now, where I was becoming more established. I was making you know more money than I had ever made at that point in time. And then in 2021, it just kind of started to plateau. And then it started to go downward and digress. And when that happened, it kind of woke me up to the fact that I was doing things out of I should do this, I need to do this, I have to do this instead of I want to do this. And I was looking at what other people were doing and just trying to replicate that. And I think that is a great path to take. It's a great strategy to do to get started, to get going, is to look at what others are doing and start to replicate things. It's really allowed me to build the foundation that I had built at that time. But then there comes a point where, as an entrepreneur or even as a creator, like if you want to really turn that dial up and start elevating to a point that you never thought possible, you got to do things that you want to do and not necessarily follow the rule book anymore. You kind of have to ditch the rule book. And a great example of that are these content creators that are the biggest creators out right now, that have the most followers, and then you start seeing everybody copy what they're doing, and they're kind of like the one of one, and they became the one of one because they just tossed the rule book out and just started making shit that they thought was cool. And everybody has to hit that point in order to really become that person that they saw in their dreams, maybe as a child, and then over time, over the course of being an adult, and the limiting beliefs come in, all that just starts to kind of chisel away at that dream, and you start losing sight of what is actually possible. It's a long journey. It's a good journey, though. It's a personal development journey.
Well, it's interesting that you say that actually because from looking at your work and just seeing your journey, I feel like you always hear the term, obviously, like you just said, personal development. But I feel like a term that I try to live by to a certain extent, and I feel like it's also a representation as you as well, is personal evolution or a personal evolution journey where you allow yourself to evolve rather than develop. And I feel like the difference there is when you have this mindset of just personal development, it's like, all right, I'm going to choose my thing. I'm going to stick on this path and I'm going to develop this for as long as I can. And I'm just going to stay on this path. Whereas within evolution, you allow yourself to diverge into other paths. And you may think that you're starting from the beginning, but you can take stuff from one path and use it to your advantage on other paths. Like for you, for example, you got into fitness and you're like, okay, I'm going to use fitness from a creation standpoint, but then that led you from a creation standpoint from like filmmaking and sort of that avenue. And
Mm,
so, yes, you were starting from the standpoint of like filmmaking from like a beginning standpoint, but are like, no, I'm using this mindset and this structure that I had from fitness and I'm taking it into this other avenue. And then that leads you into working with other creators and other brands. And that's something else that I would love to talk to you about is you've been able to connect with some really interesting people through your film work, especially
hmm
through YouTube. You had other creators and brands reaching out to you, wanting to work with you.
hmm
People like Nick Bear, Lewis Howes.
hmm
What did you learn from working with Nick Bear?
he's got that dog in him. Always has. I remember this one time we were filming, we were in Austin. I mean, this is way before the whole hybrid athlete became what it is today. This was bodybuilder Nick, powerlifter Nick. Um, it's that military background, man. It's just those guys are fucking different. I was such a shithead and a schmuck. Like, we have to get up at a certain time to go film. He wanted to go run. This was when he was huge too. He wanted to go run to get a drone shot, and sunrise was like 5 a.m. or 5:15. I don't know. It was early, and he's up and at him, coffee, fucking. He might have even had taken a shower at that point, and he had to wake my ass up, and I was really embarrassed. But I'll never forget that moment. Um, and that's just like it's such a separator. Not waking up at 5 a.m., but just the commitment that he has. And it has literally shown so many holes and gaps in my world that has been an unbelievable education for me. I don't even think he knows that. I should probably tell him that. Um, and like I mean, he was immature. I mean, we've all been stupid and immature and done silly things, and I got to experience those things with him. But even through the immaturity and the silly games and whatnot, he still executed. And so that has been just such a great education. Getting to spend time with him is like knowing when to play, knowing when to have fun, but then flip the switch, time to execute.
Another person that you did work with, Lewis Howes, and you said how he taught you how to network, make connections,
Hmm
provide value to people. And you said, I saw myself more than just a guy who creates content. I started speaking business language. What was the
hmm
mindset shift like from you from seeing yourself just as this creator YouTube guy to all right, I'm a businessman.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, wow. I think, I had never really been around people that made the amount of money that some of those guys were making. Like being in those rooms, hanging out with certain online digital marketers and educators that, were huge. I haven't even heard of these people and found out more about them, as I stopped working on those projects with them. Just being in that room, seeing how, like, the amount of revenue that you can create for yourself by providing value to people is pretty remarkable. And now it's like caught on, like the course space, right, is has a really, really negative connotation with a lot of people, and rightly so, because there's a lot of scam artists, and you'll find that in every industry, but it's super triggering for people in the online course space, and just in the online education space, because of the amount of money that these people are making, the profitability. There's like no overhead whatsoever, and or very little, I should say. And so it really started to expand my way of thinking. Like, instead of just working client to client and doing client projects, like, how can we turn these one-off projects into retainers and monthly contracts? How can I work with the same amount of people for the entire year instead of just I'll see you every 4 months or 5 months. And so I started to learn how to create certainty for myself, how to get out of scarcity. you know so many creatives, so many business owners, the up and down revenue, the peaks and valleys. Like, how can we just really create a level path for ourselves so we can create cool shit and not be in scarcity? It's hard to create in scarcity. And then with Lewis himself, like, he's just always like, the amount of meetings that we went to was insane. He knows so many people, he talks to so many people, and then his superpower is really just connecting people with the right uh, with the right people, the right people with the right people, is really his superpower. And yeah, super inspiring. Got me to think a lot differently.
When you first connected with people like that, were you always motivated and inspired of like, wow, look at what I also can do? Or was it ever sort of challenging of like, I got a long way to go?
It was triggering. It was maybe not triggering, um, but it was. I felt small. I remember that I felt incredibly small, like, probably not how you would want to feel. Instead of uplifting, I think there's a great quote with Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart, where Kevin was telling Joe, like, I'm not. I could look at this whole podcast setup and feel like small, like you have the biggest podcast in the world. Instead of looking at this, instead of looking at it that way, I can look at this and say to myself, there's an opportunity for me to create something just as big, if not bigger. And I still had a lot to learn. I mean, and in that world, a lot of them talked about their feelings, right? And there's this really clear connection, when, not all the time, but a lot of the time, because the more money you make, there tends to be a personal development evolution for yourself. And so everyone there was so, like, into learning about me. What do you do? And I just felt so seen. And I felt small because I'm like, oh, I'm just here filming. And I was doing free work for Lewis to get my name out there more. So I wasn't even getting paid. So I just felt small. Meanwhile, they're like so open and transparent. And you could just tell. And I didn't know this at the time. I know now. But at the time, they went through a lot, a huge transformation. They've learned about themselves. They looked at those parts that they're not happy with. They looked at those parts in the mirror and corrected them. They made them better. And because I hadn't experienced that yet, I was insecure. I was small. All these things. It was triggering. I do remember feeling, you know, triggered to some degree.
Yeah, I think a big part of that, and I haven't been surrounded by people like that, but I've been surrounded by successful people before, and I feel like the reason for that can be is you always just think of the accomplishments of the person instead of
Hmm.
the actual person. It's like, is this person intimidating, or am I just intimidated by their success? And I think
Yeah,
a
that's a
big
great point.
that's a big part about it. Fast forwarding, you were in Chicago, and it's actually Lewis Howes who was the one who told you you got to move out of your parents' house and get uncomfortable. And then
Hmm.
taking that a step forward, you move from Chicago to LA and you actually make, I guess, a risk at the time, but you didn't wait for your lease to end in Chicago. You had about $6,500 of sunk cost, but you thought it was worth it at the
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
And I'm a big believer that making a big change to your environment can have a big shift in your mindset and your identity. How do you think
Hmm.
you evolved as a person when you moved from Chicago to LA?
I didn't make this up, but the transformation is always in the transaction. And so the higher the transaction, the higher the amount that you are willing to put forth towards something, the more commitment that you have to have towards that thing. Like when I take on clients, the ones that where it's a financial stretch and it's not cheap, I charge anywhere from 12 grand to 20 grand to work with me for anywhere 90 to 180 days. And for a handful of people, like that's a really big stretch. Not many people have done that before. And but when they do that, and it is a huge stretch, those are some of my best clients because there is no other option. There's only forward. You know, you got to burn the boats, right? The whole, I don't even know if Tony Robbins came up with that, but um, that's where that comes from. Putting your back against the wall, and your only path is forward. And so I had that experience. I've had that experience multiple times throughout my life, and every time I've done it, it has brought a lot of transformation. Whether it's belief in myself, whether it's something that doesn't go wrong, but then I'm able to figure it out. Huge level of confidence there.
So you moved to LA, and at the time when you were in Chicago, you're traveling around and you're collaborating with people, like I said, like Lewis Howes and Nick Bear, who are
Uh-huh.
more so in the health, personal development space.
Hmm.
And then when you move to LA, you evolve a little and you start working more so within the music and entertainment space with
Hmm.
people like G-Eazy and Pusha T.
Hmm. Hmm.
What was it like with that sort of switch in people that you were working with?
I realized real quick that I didn't like working in the music industry. I'll tell you that. That is a tough business. Everything has to get approved. Like they might have all the money in the world, but their budgeting is crazy. Like I'm sure this is just, you know, speaking to all creators that have worked in the music space. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And luckily for me, those were kind of one-off projects um, that were great for credibility for other projects, but I would want to stay out of the music space. So it was a very short-lived experience, and I'm glad I got a taste, but just really not my thing. For some people, I'm sure it's great, but I'm just the horror stories that I've heard is just sad. Uh, and Trying to think what else. Oh, I really started to kind of find my scene in that education space, and that's really where I learned online business, digital marketing, creating products and resources. Like I've learned how to do those things before. Now it feels like everybody's got a digital product these days, right? Because that stigma of like the course creator, online course is starting to kind of evaporate a little bit, which is great because they are really helpful. Um, but I found myself working with those people because, for the most part, they are in the personal development space. They do want to see you succeed. I did get to charge my worth, and I had a lot of great experiences. So, working with all those different kinds of people, I found, what I liked and what I didn't like. And then I went towards the thing that I liked and really tried to kind of niche in that space and make a name for myself and build something sustainable.
So you talked about it just now, how you had launched your creative coaching business, and your next evolution occurs in 2019 where you decided you're not going to take on any more client work so that you can completely focus on your creative blueprint coaching business.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I heard you say on another podcast in relation to this, you said, I'm really trying to live in my higher self where I've already made it and make those decisions of that
Hmm.
future version of yourself. And you would say no to work that didn't play into that bigger vision. And I think that's probably the most profound thing that anyone can do for becoming who they truly want to be. From my
Hmm.
own personal experience, I mean, I caddied all throughout my
Hmm.
summers in college, would make incredible money, and then also on the weekends right after graduation, I would caddy on the weekends, and
Hmm.
that would be able to cover my rent and groceries, and I would make incredible money on the weekends as well. And then I
Hmm.
got to a point where I thought to myself, I'm making this great money, but the person that I want to be, the stuff that I want to be working on, does that person have the time or the interest in caddying? And it was pretty instantaneously where I was just like, no, that person would never caddy ever again. And at the time for you, when you realized this, where you wanted to go all in on your coaching,
Hmm.
what did that higher self look like for you in 2019?
I think it was very different from, what it is today. It was more of kind of following what others were doing and kind of copying their blueprint, their path that they've done for themselves so that I could recreate it for myself. And like I said, that works. I will say that saying no is probably one of the greatest words and full sentences that you can create or say for yourself towards somebody else. And I think that tip alone would save so many people heartache and headache. My future self looked at time differently. That was really big. I started to learn how to value my time and how to cost things, like starting to hire people, starting to outsource, starting to automate things, starting to figure out like where I can save as much time as I possibly can. And those one-off projects were, a great little payday, a great little, hit of dopamine for the day. But then, I'm filming all day and then I'm editing all of it. And, you know, could I have hired an editor? I did. I did get to a point where there were projects that I didn't want to do. And so I'd hire an editor and they would do it on my behalf. And then I would just, profit the difference. Um, but I felt like I was really starting to build something, and I was. And I'm a huge believer of really going all in on your vision. And as long as you have some certainty for yourself, like something that I'm always telling people is, okay, what's the thing that you really want to do? Do you have certainty right now? Okay, you don't. How can we create a little bit of certainty? It doesn't have to be a ton, but just something. So you have something coming in so you're not freaking out and panicking, um, because I don't think you can create your best work. I think a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure goes a long way, but to have, to be in this constant dread all the time, um, I don't think you can create your best work in that environment. I'm sure there's people that have done it though. There's got to be. Um, I just think too much of it can be more harmful than good. But I think stress and pressure is a positive thing.
You had also started at that time a bag brand, but you put it on hold. Was it
Mm-hmm.
was that challenging for you to do in the moment to sort of say I can't push forward on this project that I have?
Yeah, I mean that was really hard. I mean, I had so many people ask me like, where is it? What's going on? What's happening? And it kind of made me feel like a bit of a failure, to be honest. Um, I'm glad that I did it though, because during kind of this discovery for myself, I've been learning like what I really want to do and who I really am. And for some, there was a point in time where I actually thought that being a coach wasn't really what I wanted. I think I listened to a lot of the voices in the space talk, being called a scam artist and being called this and that, I think had gotten to me to a point. But it was also because I wasn't being who I really was. I didn't really know who I was. And it took me a while to come back to like my roots. Like YouTuber in the parents' basement, creating cool shit. Those were my roots. That's what I love to do. And I lost sight of that. And I had to come back to it. And so now I'm in this place currently where I can see Coach Zach create, because we think of like a coach or like a life coach and we automatically assume that they look a certain way, that it's done in a certain way. Like the classic talking head stuff, not the way you do it, but like the old stuff where it's like super animated, it's just like in your face. And that's just not me. And I thought, okay, you have to be a coach. I have to be that way. But now I do it in a way that I think is cool, and it's an aesthetic and it's a vibe, and I get to intertwine my cinematography, my love for film and movies into like my content, and I've found my own way. So I found the way that I want to be a coach, and this bag brand is such a passion project for me that it's really also a challenge because I've done the coaching. I know I'm decent at it. I can do it. Um, and I don't think we're meant to do just one thing for the rest of our lives. And this bag brand is something that kind of combines all the things that I want to do in a area that I've never tapped before. And so it's been a real challenge for me and a learning curve, but it's been awesome, and I'm going to see it through. Whether it flops or it's a success, I'm going to see it through. Um, and so at that time where I was like, this, figuring out what I wanted to do, I was taught that you can't, if you try to if you try to catch two rabbits at once, you'll catch none. And that's what I felt like I was doing. I hadn't completed the coaching side of things. It was just getting started. And if you've never created a full blown running business one time and you're trying to create two at the same time, probably not, the best use of your time, or it's just going to be so slow.
You said that you felt like a failure when people were asking about the bag brand and you kind of had to put it on hold to focus on your coaching business. And I think that's a really interesting point. And a counterpoint to that, I would say, is it's a real strength because I feel like we get pushed into our brains, whether it's through personal development influencers, but I feel like it's just the common word. Like, if you have a thought for something, like, go do it. Like, you got to do it right away. And I think that's true to a certain degree, but I feel like that can also be dangerous to another degree, and it can flop and leave a bad taste in your mouth if you're not doing it from a start point where you have things lined up. I mean, for me personally, I had the thought for this podcast probably 2 or 2.5 years ago, but I knew that I wasn't at a point in my life at the present moment where I could do it the way that I wanted to or give it the care and attention that it needed. So I put it off for 2 years, but it allowed me to evolve the premise behind it and the foundation for it over that amount of time, which I probably wouldn't have had that when I started. And yes, I would have started and been able to just work my way through it. But I do think there's strength to not jumping into something right away.
Mm,
What are your
I love
thoughts on
that.
that?
I couldn't agree more. And that's, one of the things that I think I'm very impulsive. Like I have an idea and I want to just go 110%. And I kind of did it again with this bag brand, restarting it. Totally different vision, but I did it again more so to give myself like, okay, if I put this out there for a second time, I have to do this. And that's kind of the energy that I was coming from. But I agree with you. If I were to do this again, I would have started the process because just from a content perspective, it's been really challenging for me because, I'll build up this momentum and then I'll get a sample back and it won't be good. And, it's so bad that I can't even share it at this point because I don't want anything to like hurt the name of the brand. And maybe that's wrong. I don't know. Maybe that's incorrect. And so maybe I'll learn later that, I probably should have just shared more and, you know, go for it and forget, stop trying to, you know, put all these plans together perfectly. Um, but yeah, I definitely, it's been kind of tough for me because there's so much that I want to share and just feel like, I have to get to a certain point first because that momentum is like it's a wave. It's like it comes and it goes, and you kind of have to hit that momentum right.
Going back to a point that you said earlier about yourself, you felt like you became detached to yourself and you felt like you had to get back to that YouTuber, creator, living in your basement part of you that was in Chicago. And you also said that when you were in LA, there were a lot of voices in LA.
Mm.
What did you mean by that?
I think I was in a space and around people that didn't fully understand my vision. And that's something that I think you have to be very careful of and protect. I think it's important to surround yourself with really high level people, but it's also easy for them to transfer over their beliefs and their limitations, but more so their beliefs on what is right versus what is wrong. Um, and I had to go back to like being alone again, being in that basement, being just by myself without anybody, without hanging out with people and doing things or just oversharing, you know. I'm sure you've heard that before, or people that are listening to this have maybe heard that. Like oversharing can be a hindrance. It could impact something, it could, you say something and you're really excited about it and somebody says one thing and it just puts that little limitation on that idea. And so that's kind of what I was experiencing. I just felt like, I wasn't listening to my intuition. I wasn't being who I wanted to be. And when I got away from LA and came to Arizona, I finally felt, first of all, my nervous system finally just fucking chilled out. And I like, I blew up my entire business essentially and kind of lived the retired life for like a year and a half. Um, and I was really blessed to have that, to be able to do that. Um, but yeah, I like didn't really do anything, create anything new for like a year, but it allowed me, it was like a gap year for school. It like, think about how many people wouldn't go to college if they took a gap year, right? Same fucking thing. I needed like a year to get back to who I am and who I want to be and not let the money just drive me where I, wanted to go.
Did
So
you feel a physical difference when you moved from LA to Arizona, just like health wise?
yeah, yeah, I was fucking stressed out. I was
That's really
stressed out.
interesting.
I was stressed out all the time. Like what people don't understand about LA is, and it's all about what you value, right? And if you value it, it's fine. But for me, like I lived in Marina Del Rey, I was like a mile away from the beach, but just getting to the beach was just an ordeal. It was a fucking just like so many people. Yes, you could bike ride there. We didn't have bikes. That was probably another issue that I had. But probably should have gotten some bikes. That would have, solved all things. But just going anywhere, like you have all the things, but then you got to get there. And then it's the people, it's the constant comparison. There's just a lot of things there that were hurting me, and I didn't realize they were hurting me for my development. And I got a lot of good things from there. I built an amazing network. But I believe that if you're putting out amazing shit, you don't have to network at all. They'll come to you, you know. Something will come together. I mean, I feel like I'm living proof of that because, I was in the suburbs of Chicago. I wasn't in LA, and I made some amazing connections. I think you put out unbelievable shit, and those people are going to come knocking on your door, and then you get invited to things, and then you go, and then you can start networking and stuff. But I don't think you have to actively put yourself in physical places all the time. It's still a good thing, but I don't think it's a necessity that people think that needs to be done.
Tying that back to the bag brand, you said earlier how you're not sharing as much, or maybe you want to have things buttoned up before you put stuff out there. Do you think subconsciously that's still because you may have like a little PTSD from LA and people not believing in the vision, or people not liking what you're sharing?
I 100%. I believe that I think I'm doing all the things that I should be, but I'm sabotaging in some way. I think we all kind of sabotage things in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's at a really grand scale, and sometimes it's smaller things that are slowing our progression. And I believe I'm doing it, and I'm trying to figure out where that is. And I don't really know just yet. I haven't quite discovered it. Personally, I think a lot of it has to do with, okay, it's been so long. So the longer it goes, the more sweet and the more fucking awesome it has to be. And I think a lot of people do that with content, right? You go a certain period of time not putting something out there, you feel like, oh my God, I haven't put something out in so long. First of all, you have to announce, hey guys, I'm back. You know what I mean? You see that all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do that. You could literally just post your fucking video after 2 months and not have to say I'm back or anything. Just create your video if you think it's awesome, post. So I think it's a lot of that. It's like it's been so like the longer it goes, the more sick it has to be. I haven't created a physical product before in my life. How can I expect myself for it to be a fucking hit on the first one? That's crazy. So now that I say that out loud, I think a lot of it has to do with that.
I know you've spoken about it a lot with building community. Do you think that's an aspect of becoming more comfortable? And I don't know what your thoughts are on that. If that's a challenge for you when it's a brand, like where it's just a bag rather than a brand, whether it's with creating where you can put a person behind it. But do you feel like if you're able to strengthen the community around the brand first, that would give you more confidence to share more about the process and maybe have the process be a little bit more raw in real time rather than showing the world kind of a finished product?
Totally, 100%. I think there's things going on in my, personal life that I feel like have impacted me wanting to create. I mean, for me, like I I have to be in an inspiring space. And if I'm not in an inspiring environment, that starts to weigh down on me. And, you know, the missus and I have been in this place where we've gotten a lot of value in our current environment, but it's time. We've outgrown it, and it's time for something new. And so it's a lot of just it feels like I'm living in a place that's not my home. And so there's a lot of limbo, period. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to show up all the time. Um, but without like using that as an excuse, um, yeah, I think I have a lot of areas where I do a lot of great things, but I need to do more. Like I really need to create more content. And that's something that I really want to do. And I think it's finding what that is and committing to it. I mean, I don't know, people have been following me for a while. They might think that's crazy, but I mean, we all have our insecurities. We all have our thoughts about our work, and I am no different. And so, yeah, it's time for me to kind of sign that verbal contract and commitment to myself about, okay, it's time to pull the content lever and fucking go and quit goofing around. But it's also hard, like when you do feel like you're in a bit of a limbo period, and I have been kind of like all year.
Do you feel like you need another environment change? I know that you live in Arizona right now, but do you feel like you need to be somewhere else?
Yeah, I do. Not Arizona. I love Arizona. We're never leaving. Well, never say never, but we'll be here for a while. Frickin' love it here. It's a gem. But you're right. I mean, I do need an environment change. I am another big believer in if you have a certain vision, whether it's to create a certain type of content um, or whatever it is, you need to do what it takes to match that vision. And right now, kind of what I'm doing day to day is not matching that vision, and that's bothering me. There are workarounds, like, you know, if, like, for example, if you haven't made that much money and you're still kind of progressing towards, a certain kind of aesthetic, or like I get people ask me like, hey, I'm really into aesthetics, and like, do I have to have the house? Do I have to have the fancy house? And I would say, no, you don't. You don't have to have the fancy house. If you love interiors and aesthetics, like you can go to these places, you can go to hotel lobbies, you can collaborate with Airbnbs, you can collaborate with luxury properties. There's so many things that you can do that are outside of the home. And if you want to be more of a lifestyle creator and actually be authentic and show the journey, then show the home. You know what I mean? And that's what I've done here. But it's definitely time for a change.
A point that I brought up earlier from the quote that you said is you're always trying to make decisions and act like you are your higher self. What does it feel like that higher self for you is now or 2 to 3 years out?
I think I think one of the biggest things for me is really staying true to my word and being ultra selective of the things that I say, because if I say them, like, that is a verbal contract with myself. There's a great video of Conor McGregor talking about his camp. He lost a fight, and he said during that camp that he had all these micro failures compiling. Like he said, I'm not going to eat that. And then he went ahead and ate that thing. He said, I'm not going to drink that. And then he went ahead and drank that thing, alcohol or whatever. And so he went against his word, even in the smallest of ways, but they compounded. And I feel like I really relate to that. There are areas where I still feel like I'm doing that, and my future self does not do that. And it goes back to kind of, the whole Nick Bear thing. It's like, you know, he committed to getting up. He committed, and it's so simple. It's just a silly drone shot, but he had a vision and he committed to it, and he was up, ready to go. And that is the separator, is the execution and staying true to your word.
Yeah, I don't think we realize how powerful or how good it feels if we just have a small task that we have for ourselves and actually do it when we say we're going to do it. And going to be as basic as I'm taking out the trash at this time, I'm walking my dog at this time, where it's something that's so small, but it
Hmm.
gets you into the mindset of I do what I say I'm going to do. It doesn't have to be these massive tasks or goals, because the small things are the big things. It's cliche, but it's the truth.
Yeah, exactly. The smallest of things. Um, so just being ultra selective, like before, like I'm sure, people listening to this will write, um, they'll write something on their to-do list or something in their calendar, and then they don't do it. It could be just like waking up and then just hitting the snooze button or whatever it is. It's something so small and insignificant, it seems at the time, but they do compound. And so that alone could change your life, will change your life.
Yeah, because I think when we look at people who do extraordinary things,
Hmm.
we often think to ourselves, what is that person doing that I'm not doing? Like, what's the special sauce or what's the special secret? And I think it
Hmm.
gets down to like where you're saying with Nick Bear is it's such an obsession over the minute, basic details that you think people who do extraordinary things wouldn't think about that type of stuff or wouldn't have the time for it. But like, that's what sets them apart. It's the most basic stuff that they just do on a consistent basis, day after day for
Hmm.
years on end.
100%.
Zach, where can people go to find you and your work?
DM me on Instagram at Zack Kravits. Just shoot me a DM. I respond to all my DMs. Might take a couple days, but I will respond. And yeah, say hi. Send me a message.
Awesome, Zach. I appreciate you for coming on the Outworker.
Appreciate it, man. This has been great.